everyone. Welcome. I'm glad to be here today. I have a special guest with me today I'm excited about. I'm actually really excited about this one. Paul and I have known each other for a while, and I think, let's see, the first time I met Paul was several years ago in Ireland. I think was the first time him and I were actually face to face in the same room together. And I can't remember the last time I saw you, but I'm glad you're able to join me today. Thank you for doing that. I know Paul's actually joining us from Los Angeles, and we just want to extend our hearts, our thoughts, our prayers to everybody there in LA and everything that's happening over the last few days. Paul has been under some evacuation orders the past few days. He just was talking to me about that, and but he did not have to evacuate. So we're glad that you're safe. Your house is still intact, and we're grateful that you're able to join us today. I know a lot of people are going through some hard times, but thank you for joining us. I know the reason I'm excited about this one is if anybody has joined me on any of my sessions before, they know I always say, if I was a casting director, this is how I would do it. Or if I was a casting director, I would think this way. But today we have the pleasure of actually talking with a casting director, so I don't have to say that anymore today. So, Paul, if you don't mind introducing yourself to everyone and giving us a little bit of background, let us know how you got started, what you're currently doing, and how you got started. Love to hear that.
Sure. Thanks, Jeremy. And yes, a big shout out to all of our first responders out here who are working tirelessly to help save homes and property and lives. So we are still in the middle of all this, but I'm glad I'm able to be here with you today, which wasn't 100% assured. So I'm glad we're able to chat a little bit. I am a casting director. I live in Los Angeles, and this is where my base is and has been for many years now. I started actually, as many of you out there start or have started as an actor, and that helped me a lot in terms of my transition into casting because I understood how an actor's process informs their technique, and because I studied as an actor, both formally and in practice, doing a lot of equity professional theater and some film and television, that when I first moved to LA, which is kind of what you had to do back in the day, you had to actually move to a major production city, which was mostly Los Angeles and to a lesser extent New York, and that was kind of it. So there was a sort of an exodus of actors from everywhere else to LA. Now we can talk a little bit about at some point how that's changed dramatically, and that has benefited in many ways a lot of actors' access to the industry. But at the time, that's what we had to do. And after you finish school, which I did, and which was mostly theater-based training, I had to figure out what it was like to come to the city and learn auditioning technique and on-camera technique and commercial technique, and this was the place to do it. So when I arrived here after spending several years working professionally elsewhere, I came to LA and figured I had to access casting directors, and in addition to training. So I did all those things. And one of the things I decided to do was to sit in and participate in a casting director workshop, which proliferated in Los Angeles, especially at that time. There are a lot of casting directors teaching, and we were able to gain access to knowledge and experience. And I came up afterwards to one of the leading casting directors in television at the time. And I asked her if I could intern in her office. So she said, yes, as long as you're willing to work for free. And I said, well, I guess that's what interning means. So I was totally okay with that. And I learned a lot. It was a big production house. It produced a lot of television. And so I got lucky there. And it really helped me as an actor to learn what it was like on the other side of the camera. So I was able to be a reader for other actors. I was able to put actors on tape, and these were really good actors. These were actors auditioning for some of the top shows in television at the time. So I was able to get a great education as an actor working in a casting office. And then over time, I started just to like it more and more. And because I had training as an actor and as a director for theater, I had a kind of a shorthand language with actors and also a great empathy, sometimes sympathy, but mostly empathy for actors and what we all were going through at the time and still go through in terms of not quite figuring out how it all works in the industry. And that was a huge eye opener for me, to the point that over time, my bosses offered me a job, and they also said, you know, you're really good at this. You know how to talk to actors. You know how to create results with them or get them to think about a scene in a different way. And that came naturally to me, I suppose, because I'd sort of grown up studying acting and being an actor, and now being on the other side, it took a little bit of the pressure off of me to be the performer and more the director and more the educator, which I think was probably a better fit for me in the long run. So I had some great mentors and great support and some champions along the way that gave me opportunities. Um, and then I had some opportunities to work over at a major studio, MGM, where I ran their TV division for many years. And that was also an amazing experience for me. And now I'm mostly doing a lot of independent casting in film and television. And a lot of international casting through the contacts that I've made throughout the years. And also, I'm an educator and an audition technique teacher as well too. So I coach over Zoom, which has been a blessing, and with actors all over the world, and travel and teach internationally. Audition technique for actors everywhere. Because great acting is great acting, whether you speak Bulgarian, English, or or Australian. So, so that's where we are now, and I'm right now working on several well-financed but independent films. Many of them shooting, several of them shooting internationally.
Oh, very good. So you work worldwide. You started off working for free, and they eventually decided to pay you.
Yeah, you kind of have to, put in the time, and you have to really let people know that what you're willing to do. And that was a big lesson for me. I wasn't sure. I thought, gosh, should I keep acting? Should I move into casting? I was also a production assistant for a while, working on set and location scout, and I was doing a lot of different things. And then I had to sit down and say, what should you focus on? And I had a couple of great mentors who said, we can't help you unless you tell us exactly what you want. So I had to sit down and pick one. They said, what are you good at? Pick one of them, focus on it, because you'll never really get good at anything unless you really focus on that one thing first. And once you become really good at that, then you'll have some opportunities to expand and wear different hats, which is exactly what I ended up doing. And the moment I decided that's what I was going to do, pick casting, um, lots of doors opened up, because no one really knew what I was. They said, are you still an actor? Are you doing casting? Are you a production assistant? Are you scouting? So that was a great lesson for me, and something that someone can tell you, but unless you really listen and hear it, you won't take that advice. until you're ready to take it. And I was ready to take it. And once you take that advice and take the first steps into action, that's when things start happening.
Well, I love this story. It's funny because I talk to a lot of people on here, and it seems like everybody started off somewhere, and now they're doing what they're currently doing. And I tell people all the time. I tell aspiring actors how, or models, or anybody that's interested in the business, how important it is to network. Always be networking wherever you go. Network, because the person that you're talking to today might be holding the microphone on set for you, but tomorrow they might be a casting director, or tomorrow they might be behind the camera directing a film, or they might be a writer. And so, how important it is in this industry to really be friendly to everybody, to network wherever you're at, and to really just get to know people every time you're on set or around other people in the industry.
Yeah, it is. You're so right about that, Jeremy. It's such a personality driven industry. So, more so than almost any other, although every business, in a sense, is personality driven, unless you're locked in a lab somewhere. Mostly it's face forward and engaging with people. And I think we need to do as much of that as possible, especially since so many people seem to feel isolated. We all need to sort of get in out there and engage. And actors are, many of them, quite shy, that I've found, and they have to work a little harder at putting themselves out there, because if you don't make a little noise, or if we don't really get a chance to know you, you may be the most talented actor in the world, but we're not able to help you unless, again, you tell us and show us what you're capable of doing. So it's really important. Actors all over the world, in any market, even the smaller markets, get engaged as much as possible. Get engaged with the local film festivals. Every little town has a film festival now, it seems, or those 48-hour challenges of film festivals. Student films, like you said, if the student filmmaker that you might be in a short with, who comes from one of the local universities or colleges, in 3 or 4 or 5 years, they could be a director for film and television, because that's their dream, that's their goal. And it's important to stay in contact with all of the people that you work with, and continue to create new relationships and put yourselves out there. I know sometimes it can be a little overwhelming for actors to constantly be on, but you don't really have to be on. You just need to be engaged, and let other people know what you're working on, how much passion you have for it, what your goals are. And again, when we see that kind of attraction to moving forward and in a positive way in your career, there are people out there. All of us are happy to help, because we all had to start that way as well.
Right. Well, I have lots of questions for you. So I'm going to
Oh,
get
right.
started here.
That's why we're here. Yeah, I'm sorry.
One question, I think this is probably important to address this, right from the beginning, is can you explain to us exactly what a casting director does? I think some people, they think casting director and they think one thing, and I'm sure your job entails a lot more than what most people think it is. But can you kind of go over what a casting director does?
Uh, I'll try to simplify it. In a way, we are like chefs in the kitchen. We try to gather the best, finest, freshest, most available ingredients we can for our dishes. And the dish is a television show or a film. And we assemble those ingredients in a way that we hope our producers and directors find tasty, and sometimes we don't always get it right. We have to go back in the kitchen, and one of our producers might be a vegetarian, and we have to go, oh my gosh, we need to make something different. So in a way, that's a way of making what can be a relatively complicated process in many ways, but there are many layers of it. I try to simplify that a bit with that analogy. But what we do is we work very closely with agents and managers to access their talent for projects that we are looking to cast. Um, and we do that through a great knowledge of actors, a certain taste in what our producers and directors or studio or network is looking for, and the relationships we have with talent and with agents and managers, and how quickly we're able to access that in sometimes a very short period of time if you're doing a television series. Um, is what we do on a daily basis. And I've been doing it for many years. And every time I start a new project, it feels like you're starting all over again, and you're not even sure you're able to do it because it's all brand new again. But the greater the access we have to talent, the greater the databases we build over the years, the more we're able to sort of quickly go to actors that we think would be right for projects. Um, we try to facilitate agreement between our directors and producers and studios and networks. I mean, there are a lot of chefs in the kitchen, and we try to make them all of them as happy as we can. And again, we're dealing with human beings. It's not like I can go on Amazon and order 30 actors for a TV show and have them delivered in 48 hours. We really have to go in there and dig, and we're also dealing with human beings. So an actor might be fantastic on their demo reel or amazing the first time they send in a self tape. We bring them back, and something happens in their lives, and they're not where they were in the previous early self tape, and I have to try to convince producers or directors to give them another shot. I don't have control over all of that. You guys do, the actors do out there. So whenever you are auditioning, help us help you by being on point and on your toes and ready to sort of perform at that level, at the highest level possible, as often as possible. It's all about consistency too. So with the auditioning process with actors, we're always looking for actors who can consistently deliver solid and memorable performances. I'm going to move you around a little bit, maybe. There we go. Look, it's almost angelic, isn't it? What's going on out there?
that morning sunlight coming through.
That's right. Good. All right.
I have a question for you as well. So obviously you deal with a lot of actors, and your job is to find the right one. You have to say no. I tell people this all the time. If you see 100 people, 100 self tapes, your job is to say no to 99, right? So how many times are you casting and you have a hard time to decide, let's say like the top 3? Like, tell us a story about, like, how do you determine sometimes who you're going to choose, especially when you love, 2 or 3 or however many that are there?
Well, you're right. The unfortunate part about this is many, many people can audition for a role and only one gets chosen, um, seems so unfair because there's so many really good actors. So to put a positive spin on that, rather than wah, wah, the positive spin is, because we see a lot of really good actors, what I try to do is, I feel really fortunate when I'm able, out of maybe 300 self tapes, if I can pull 8 or 9 really good auditions, and some of them may be very different. Some of the visuals might be very different in terms of the way that the actors look or their types. and even a bit pushing on age ranges a little bit, depending on what kind of flexibility I have from my producers and director. And then what I try to do is, again, present the best of what I think the producers and directors should look at, and have them choose. Many actors think that casting directors make the decisions. We may make the decisions on who we curate for the producers and directors to look at to streamline the process for them, but we don't choose the actors. Uh, the network does, or the studio does. We just give them what we think are the best options. And the best options that we present are actors that we would be happy, any of them getting cast in it. Also, the good news is if you are able to get that kind of callback, or you rise to the top of that, even though one actor gets chosen, all of those actors are remembered, at least by casting, because we found their work compelling enough to take to the next level. And even though only one actor is chosen, they look at all of them and they remember those actors. I remember those actors. And those actors would be the ones I would go to for another project because I know that they can deliver. So your job, or an actor's job, is to, again, audition as effectively and consistently as possible so that you will continue to be remembered, even if you don't get that job. And actors sometimes forget that. These auditions go out into a void, especially if it's a self-tape, and you may never know that how close you came, maybe necessarily. So just you have to think always that, gosh, I did feel good about what I did. I got to send it out there and just try to let it go, and hope I get another audition and continue to do the good work. You don't often get the validation maybe that you deserve. We just don't always have time. We hardly ever have time to, I can't call you guys up at home and go, that was really good, maybe next time. And you made it to the top 3 or 4. You may
Right.
never know that. You just have to feel like you're doing the work you need to do, keep doing it, and try not to obsess so much about what we might be thinking, or did I get a call back, or who else is auditioning, or you don't have any control of that. So why waste any energy or time on that? The only thing you do have control over in this entire process is what you deliver to us. And that's a lot of control from the
Right.
actor's point of view, because nothing else really matters except what you present to us. The rest of it, I don't even have control over. It's really the studio and the networks who dictate to me that we're going to maybe change a role to another gender or another ethnicity. I don't have any control of that. And you guys may think, oh gosh, I felt good about that, but never heard from anybody. Well, we've changed the description of the character, overnight. And I don't know anything about that until I hear about it. And I can't alert everyone, thank you for your audition, but we're going a different way here, and you won't be exactly the type we're looking for now. So don't worry about all that stuff. We live in a very anxious world anyway. It's one less thing to worry about. And the thing you should be concerned about and focusing on is your own audition and delivering the best and, again, most consistent level of work you can.
I always tell people that do the best you can, and then try to forget about it. Right? That's the best thing you can do, and make fans along the way. Right? So you're basically telling me that if it came down to maybe 2 or 3 people, you couldn't decide, you sent it to the studio for them to decide, you still love all 3 of those people. And so on the next project, whoever gets chosen for this project, on the next project that person's perfect for, you'll reach out and try to get them on that audition.
Yeah, that's, in a way, that's your callback. It may not come for 6 months. It may not come for even longer than that. But when you get a casting director reach out to you again, it's because they like what you did the last time, or
Right.
think you might be right. So again, your job is to audition. If you do book, that's, oh my gosh, that's amazing, for you, and that's validation that you're doing um, you're doing something right. But you could still be doing something right and not get that call to go to set, and that's what you, as difficult as it is, that's what you should not be discouraged by, that this is what the process is. So do not take it personally. It's really just a business decision. And the more you get used to the idea of that, the more you'll free yourself just to do the good work. And the actors that I know who understand that totally get that and go, you know what, it just didn't work out this time, but I felt really good about what I did. Do they get a little discouraged sometimes? Sure. But the only way you are a survivor in the business is, and have longevity in it, is if you understand that that's what the process is. So instead of getting discouraged and down about that, why don't you pick yourself up again and keep improving on your audition skills, keep training, keep taking classes, improv, whatever marinates you creatively, so that your level of work keeps getting better and better. And I tell you, the more you do that, the more you stick with it. If this is something you really want to do, I find that does eventually pay off sooner or later.
Nice. Well, very good. So my question, another question I have quite a bit is, with virtual auditions nowadays, and you have self tapes and all that happening, how many do you typically choose? Can you tell us what the average submission is to a casting? So if you place a casting, you're looking for somebody very good looking like myself with a beard. I see that casting, my agent submits me on that. What's the usual number that I am in that submission? And then from there, how many do you typically decide to choose to actually send in a self tape?
Oh gosh, I'm almost. This is going to sound kind of daunting, but sometimes even for a smaller role, maybe 5 lines or less, we could get up to 1,000 submissions. Um, if it's a union project, agents are desperately trying to get their actors considered. So we will go on to our casting sites where we, let's say, a breakdown, and we will, when agents submit or actors submit, we go through all those submissions. And I can go through them pretty quickly. We sort of get an instinct about what we're looking for. Some of the actors we know. So if we know them, another reason why you want to keep relationships current is, oh, right, I remember that actor. I had them in for something else, or I ran into them somewhere, or they were at a film festival and we chatted. Yeah, I'm going to have them come in and read for that. And come in and read these days means self-tape. So what I will do is, probably out of that maybe 1,000 submissions for that role, I will maybe have 20 self-tape
Okay.
that I feel confident will deliver. And out of that, I will probably narrow it down to 6 or 7. And those are the choices that I would send to the producer and the director.
Okay.
So it sounds like Squid Game a little bit, but that's usually our process. We can't see
Right.
everybody.
Right.
However, these days, the advantage, again, I always try to circle around to a more constructive, positive perspective, is because more actors are self-taping and we are not bringing actors into the room as much physically, we're able to see more actors, and we're able to expand the possibilities for actors. So maybe that group of 20 might expand to 40 if we have time, because I don't have to see them personally and schedule time for that. I can watch those self-tape auditions anytime I want during the casting process. It could be midnight, and then and it often is. So I don't mind doing that and creating a schedule for myself where I can look at all these self-tape auditions. That's what my day is. So the advantage of that is that we're seeing more actors. The disadvantage is that we're seeing more actors sometimes. So again, you want to be, if you're considered, you want to have the the most compelling audition you can, so that you are memorable enough for us to consider bringing in.
So you send an audition out into the universe, and you receive 1,000 submissions. From there, you typically narrow it down to about 20 that you actually want them to self-tape for you. From the self-tape process, can we talk about that a little bit? I know
Sure.
obviously it's
And
I'm
and
sure
and
you've
again,
seen
it
it
depends
all.
on the size of the roles. Sometimes on smaller roles, I'll kind of know actors who'll be able to deliver that. But when we're talking about larger roles, guest lead roles, leads, co-leads in films, we will usually, and films we usually have more time. We will see many, 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 many more actors. Sometimes hundreds of actors. We will go through that process. The 20 out of 1,000 is usually because we're moving really quickly and we're doing an episodic
Got it.
TV episode. We only have a few days to cast it, so we
Right.
need to streamline and narrow down the process. But with films and larger roles, we will dig deeper and go wider, especially if we have the time. And we
Okay.
will also go internationally if we can, if we
And
need.
so you probably get a lot more submissions for those as well.
Yes, but because the larger the role is, the more we can narrow down the actors that we think would be most appropriate or have a track record of. And sometimes they are lead actors who are star names, stars that everyone would know that we need to anchor the project with. And unless we can anchor the project with a name that everyone recognizes and is bankable, we're not really able to make that film, especially if it's an independent film. So everyone wants a break, but none of the actors under that level get that break unless we're able to attach someone who can greenlight the picture as well too. So you need those names, even though every actor auditioning wants to be one of those names at some point.
Right. It's like a catch-22, right?
Yeah, but there are roles for everybody and
Right.
for all types now. And because of what's going on with streaming and diversity casting, look at what's out there. It's not what it
Right.
used to be, where there were just all pretty white people mostly doing TV and most film. It's opened up hugely these over the past relatively short number of years, where we are now able to see more and more actors from more and more diverse backgrounds and cultures and countries. And that's been really gratifying for us as casting directors. I think I speak for many of us that we're able to really throw the net out wider now, and there's less excuse given by actors, or should be, that, oh my gosh, I am carrying 10 extra pounds, they're never going to want to see me, or I have a strange little dot on my cheek, and I'm not pretty enough or good looking enough. You got to get rid of all that now, because when you just watch what's out there.
Right.
We're looking at real people who happen to be actors, rather than actors who look like actors.
Right.
We'll always need those great sort of leading guys and girls, but look at all the, I mean, I just look at Baby Reindeer or any of these shows.
Right.
These are not people that you would normally think would be leading Emmy award-winning TV shows.
Right.
So take heart in that, and also stop using that as a point of victimization, and be the best actor you can be, because we are telling far more diverse stories with far more diverse actors than we ever have in the past. And I think that's an amazing thing for everyone, including audiences, casting directors, and actors, of course.
So no more excuses.
No more excuses. And it's so easy to be victimized or feel victimized in the industry. And I think actors and artists have a lot more power than they think they do, especially when it comes to doing the work that you need to do. That's what counts first. And you can be telling your own stories in a way that wasn't as easy to do in the past. So for those actors out there who do have a compelling story to tell, you can create your own short film. You can do your own um, uh, through social media. You can, where we find actors often as well too. You can find a place at the table there that we will take notice of, and that's how some of these projects get off the ground. Are sort of being found in different corners that we didn't know existed in the past.
Right. Yeah, definitely with technology and everything, it's made the world a smaller place for actors
Yeah.
being seen by good people. So
Yes.
going back going back to that, I'm still trying to pick your brain in the whole casting process, if you don't mind.
Sure.
So say you're casting for a film and you're spending some time and you're seeing, a lot of people submit to that project, and from there, let's say you chose 100 to self tape for you. How many of those 100, just curious, typically would you say that you do not watch their entire tape? So they submitted the tape, you sent them instruction on what you're looking for, and you're sitting at home doing your work, opening up some of these videos to watch. How many times or what percentage would you say you actually do not completely watch it through from start to finish?
You're just trying to pin me down on this, aren't you? And how many people are going to watch this through the
Well,
end?
I'm curious because I want to lead to kind of the next question beyond that is, how important it is for these self tapes to really be on point and to try to stand out really isn't that hard. You just have to put a little effort and a little thought into it to make sure that you're being seen. But I also liken it to today's world where it's a swipe world. The 3-second retention they tell you on social media, you have to grab somebody's attention for 3 seconds. I know that translates into your business as well. And if you don't mind having us take a little peek into that.
Yeah, I'm not going to sugarcoat that. It's exactly right. Uh, I I would like to think that our attention spans are longer than most mortals, but they're not. Um, because we are looking through so many people, we have to trust our instincts, our judgment, and it's not always fair. Uh, but we do move relatively quickly, and we do need in that first handful of seconds, really, to we start to make judgments about the way the actor attacks the role or the visual. Is it exactly what we're looking for? The voice, the body language, all of those things, just like the first impressions we all make in life about each other in the first minute or so. It's not that different. Actors always, everyone accuses casting of always sort of stereotyping or rushing to judgment, but we all do that. We're just getting really good at it. I think because we do it a lot. Now, sometimes we miss that. We don't
Right.
always get it right, but but the actors out there really need to understand that that's what our process is, so that, like you mentioned, you have to be able to make that first impression as early as possible. Really be on your toes on the audition. Really do the work, break down the scene, understand what your character is fighting for in the scene, what they need, what they want, what makes them compelling to watch. It's kind of homework. It is homework. It should be fun homework, but it's amazing how many actors kind of just dial auditions in, and they're a little lazy. And if I see
Right.
that it's just a little lazy, then I tend to move on because there are so many actors who are
Mhm.
submitting, and I know I'm going to find most likely a handful of really good actors who know exactly what they're doing. And guess what? Those are the actors I'm going to go to. Just like in any business, you're going to go to the people that you feel are most competent. You're going to go to the best doctor. You're going to go to the best dentist. You're going to go to the best lawyer you can find. Why take a risk when there's so much money at stake? And risk our own reputations unless we are presenting to our producers and directors the very best talent that we can. So, sure, many times personally, I wish I could say I watch every single audition all the way through. But to be honest with you, I don't always do that. I
Right.
will watch every audition that is submitted to me, but I may not watch it all the way through. Unless I feel compelled to.
Right. So let's talk about that a little bit, if you don't mind. What's the most effective way for an actor to prepare a self tape in your mind? Obviously, your opinion. You open up the self tape and you're just mesmerized watching it all the way through. What are the key ingredients that are involved, for
Well,
that
first
to
of all,
happen?
there's the technicals, which we used to give a lot of wiggle room to when the pandemic was raging, but now most actors should and need to be completely prepared in terms of their technicals, which means having a great background, simple. It doesn't cost a lot of money, guys, to have that. It's, a blue, a gray background. I prefer sort of a bluer background. Dress appropriately, that where there's some contrast, where you have your lighting set up, where you ideally have a good reader reading opposite you, so that you actually create a relationship with that off-camera person who's the other actor in the scene, and that we can hear you. Um, you can be creative these days with props, which you never could be in the past. When I'm coaching actors, I encourage them, if it's appropriate, to use a prop to create their own environment in a way you couldn't before. You had to sort of uh, um, create in a sterile room for casting, and you're told not to bring any props in except your phone and a pencil, maybe, because they usually get in the way if you use them. Now, if you're in your own living room and want to create that environment, you can do that. And it is much more effective. And even as something radical as having a knife or a gun, you could never do that in the room, but you can do it, and we feel hopefully not threatened at all when we're watching your demo, your self tape, if you have something that creates a bit more of a sense of reality. So there are a lot of things that I work with actors on to encourage them to create their world that is less imaginary and more really realistic and tactile for them. And I feel like I'm going off into a little bit of a tangent, but what was your question?
Well, no, just, what are some of the key takeaways when you're
Yeah, yeah. So
mesmerized?
it's really creating your environment as much as you can, and then it's really looking at a scene, even if it's a smaller scene, and breaking that down so that when you start the scene, you have, and now we're getting a little bit in the weeds in terms of technique and training and foundation, but having a strong emotional moment before, or a physical moment that creates. Uh, um, creates in the set in the eyes of the casting director of a character that is coming from somewhere, that just doesn't start cold with a line, that has an emotional beat or a physical beat that sort of catapults them into the scene. It can be subtle or it can be quite physical, depending on how the scene is written, so that we feel like we're drawn right into it instead of it just starting cold from nowhere. And sometimes I just see actors auditions just start dead, and then they say the first line or they react to the first line. So we need to see a life behind the eyes that is created before the first line comes out. And then a follow through in the rest of the scene where there's real intention, where there is when we see a character strategically trying to figure out what they need from the other character, so that we are brought into the scene in terms of a real relationship that, you know, and a sense of humor or conflict or any of the, you know, emotional responses we have in everyday life that makes it interesting to watch. And we don't get that often enough. Many times when I see an actor do an audition, it sounds like an actor doing an audition rather than a real life happening in front of us. And it also helps to have what I call a little button at the end, an emotional beat or a physical moment before the director says cut, where the camera keeps rolling and we're actually able to see life after the last line. So those are things that I look for. And those, when I work with actors, either when I'm working on a project or I'm prepping an actor for another casting director's project, those are the things that I really focus on. That's what I want to be able to see.
Right.
And then there's a lot of text work where you really, when I'm working with actors, you know, I challenge them. I say, so what does that really mean? And is there another way to do that that might be original or more interesting than your competition? Yeah, and it depends on the actor. Every actor has their own personality, and they're going to bring their own take to the audition. And that's great. I want to see what they do, but I also want to challenge them to dig a little bit deeper, especially if you have scenes that require more investigation, not just here's your pizza, ma'am, or you know, here's your FedEx or whatever. You know, those have their own challenges. But what I'm talking about, roles where there are established relationships and there's more meat on the bone, then I really ask actors to really investigate that. And the ones who do and come to a session prepared that way are just more interesting and more are actors that we want to have on the set because they are thinking, curious, investigative artists. And you know, I'll never forget what one of my first acting teachers said when he noticed that we were just being lazy in our work. He would say, "This is something you have to understand. Acting is the bloody, detailed detective work that must be done in order to creatively reveal a character." Say that over and over again. It's hard work. It's bloody work. It's police work. You really need to investigate that. If you don't do that, you're never going to be as great an actor as you think you are. So it took a while for me to get that as an actor. And that's what I try to pound into actors when I work with them. Even established actors who've been on series that I work with, they're always discovering new things. And sometimes you need someone to sort of, either a director or a coach or someone who will challenge you to think a little bit deeper than maybe you're used to, because you've done it for so long. And sometimes, you know, actors rely on their tricks, and the best actors are always reinventing and re-exploring possibilities. And that's what we look for. That's what I like to see in an actor's work.
So you touched on a subject here that is now normal, or the new norm is props, the use of props, you know, that wasn't as easily to do back when you were in person, but because of self-tapes, you're able to. Let me ask you this. I know that a lot of people have different opinions on this, but what are your thoughts on playing the role? So let's say, for example, I have a client this week that was auditioning for a role, and it was set back in the 1970s. And so she actually got, you know, her hair done, her makeup done. She wore like a 1970s dress for this particular self tape. What are your thoughts on that? When you open up the self-tape and you see that the actors in character according to, what you've sent over, do you appreciate that, or is that something that you look down upon?
Well, uh, mostly appreciative of that. I would like to see when actors would come into the room live, I would always say dress to suggest. You don't need to necessarily wear the costume, the whole wardrobe.
Right.
We do have an imagination. We can visualize what you might look like in a nurse's outfit or a police officer's outfit. Sometimes the actors come in fully dressed. I'm not saying that's a bad thing necessarily, but I'm not saying it's a necessary thing either.
Right.
But when you are auditioning at home and there is a period piece and if it's something like that in the 70s and you can sort of dress to suggest the era a little bit, I think that's can be really effective because we're watching you guys cinematically now. We're not watching you in 3D. We're actually watching you just on a screen. And in a way, that's a great thing because it can help us visualize what you would look like on screen and how you're using the frame in your self tape. So sure, having a prop, having an environment, even if you're auditioning for like a psychiatrist or a doctor or something, and you want to do it in your den with a bookshelf in back to make you look smart, like everyone on CNN does, right? Then it's like, oh, they're using the environment for that, as long as it's not distracting. When it becomes distracting and we're more aware of the props or your wardrobe or even the environment and and we take that in more than what taking in what you're doing, that's when you what you have to be careful of. So you need to be able to use that all of those advantages that you have now without and but you need to compete with the environment now too. Now you need to sort of step up and help create that environment and just don't let that work for you exclusively.
Right. What about going off script? How do you feel about actors, changing the material a little bit or even a lot? What are your thoughts on that?
Great questions. You've been doing this for a while. Yeah, these are great questions. Mostly, I tell actors don't take chances that way. Stick to the script because that's what is on the page. And and depends on the writer, it depends on the producer. In television, the writers are the producers. So many of them might think that their script of the week is Shakespeare, right? And they want to make sure that you hit the beats that they've written. Um, and what I've found is when actors go off script, it's never better. It's usually worse. So why do it? Learn the script the way it's written. When you're on set, unless you're a star, you are supposed to deliver what's on the page for a number of reasons. That helps the other actor. It's great for the continuity of the script when they're shooting it. They need the same line delivered so that they can cover it uh, properly with cameras and make sure that it's not completely different takes or different hand actions, picking up a glass at a different time. All of those things are techniques that you have to learn when you're on set. So be really careful of that. I always say actors, please default to what's on the page. It doesn't mean that occasionally we will not ask for, and we'll usually mention it in our breakdown description, is you have a little flexibility. You can use a little improv if you like, depending on the project. Some directors like that. And so they'll encourage actors to have a little flexibility with the dialogue or the situation just to see if they can create the same sense of authenticity without the actual lines. But overall, just to be on the safer side of that, defer to what's on the page.
Okay. Even what about if it's just like one word? Let's say an actor keeps stumbling over a particular word just because it's not framed the way that I guess their mind comprehends the
Yeah.
sentencing or something. Are you okay with them changing a word if need be, if it still goes along with
Abs
what's being said?
Absolutely, as long as it's not glaringly noticeable that it's so different, but if it's that's happened a number of times, even when I'm working with an actor and they just say it a different way or have a different word that they use instead of me constantly trying to correct that, especially if I'm working with them on a one-on-one coaching, I let it slide because their intention is still really strong. And and sometimes an actor can get a block there and will be
Right.
thinking about a word that just doesn't feel comfortable for them. And that may be in the writing, but that's the writing. So your job is to try to bring what the writer put on the page to life and elevate it if you can in your own way, because not every script is Shakespeare, no matter what they say. You know, a lot of the producers and directors are waiting for an actor to elevate what they've written in a way that is original even to them, that surprises them, and say, "Oh, I never thought of it that way. I never thought that character would have done that, but it's so much more interesting than what I wrote on the page." That happens all the time, and that's gold
Right.
when I see an actor bring something truly original to material that is might be relatively pedestrian and not not necessarily award winning. Not everything is going to win an Emmy out there. You know, we're seeing a lot of content, and every actor, that's their job, is to try to elevate material that may need it. And then there's great material from like an Aaron Sorkin, let's say, that you just need to support the language
Right.
and really keep that language going and airborne, because it's all right there for you. It's already in the text, right? So actors have a lot of challenges, but you need to look at the material and make it your own without making it a Frankenstein creation of your own.
Got it. Going on, I'm seeing questions here in the chat. I want to address a couple of these from the viewers. One viewer is asking, what's one of the most important factors that you're looking for while working with an actor? So, what's one of the things that you would want to see from an actor when casting?
Uh, Gosh, well, when I'm looking at submissions, what I like to see from actors are really strong headshots that represent what they look like, and ideally some demo material, something, even if it's a self tape for another project, so that I can see what they look like and sound like and how they approach a scene. I think we're relatively generous these days when actors do not have a demo reel. Maybe they have something they can upload that we can look at so that we can see them in 3D and really get a sense of who they are and what their potential might be. Um, and then I think just distilling what we talked about before, Jeremy, about what we look for. It's an actor who brings, intelligence and investigation into that role, even if it's a smaller role, where we really see them living the life of the character, that feels like it's the first time. Which brings me to something that I better address before you ask it, and if you don't ask it, I should address it. Is for actors to be careful about well, let me just say this. There are advantages to self-taping. The advantages are you can do it as many times as you want. The disadvantages, you can do it as many times as you want. And I tell you, the more time you redo your audition, your self-tape, and try to get it perfect, every time you do that, I find that the air just starts coming out of the audition. It
Mm,
becomes more and more inorganic, over rehearsed, over practiced, over studied, over delivered, just to get everything sort of right. You may think, and then you're in your head because you're watching it over and over and over again and said, that was a little off. It didn't feel right. The more you start questioning that, the more likely it is that when we're watching it, we just see more of a slightly robotic, less organic, less raw, less human self-tape. So do all the work first, then self-tape. And I swear, for the most part, you'll get it done in 1 or 2 takes. When I work with actors, they know to come to the session prepared. And I say, we're only going to do this a couple of times. We're going to investigate maybe a couple different ways to do it. Maybe we'll lay down 2 different versions. But if we have to self-tape or redo this 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 times, it's just going to get worse.
Right.
So be aware of that as well too. And it's hard because there may not be anyone there to show it to, and all you're doing is looking at yourself, and we're our own worst critics sometimes. And that even goes for if it's a missed word or kind of a stumble, or that's what people do in real life anyway.
Right.
So I'd much rather see a sort of a raw, sort of fresh audition than something that's been over rehearsed to the point where it just becomes stale and predictable.
Right. Definitely. Yeah. I see some clients of mine. Sometimes they say, okay, I'm going to send you the tape. I'm getting started now. I'll send it to you when I'm done. And 4 or 5 hours later, here comes the tape. And I'm thinking, wow.
And they've been working on it all that time, or the next year. Right.
How many
Yeah.
times? Yeah. So shifting gears here a little bit. I was curious, if you don't mind, I would love to pick your brain about the state of the film or television industry as it is today. I know that it's constantly evolving and constantly changing. And what would you say that you're seeing a lot of? And what tips could you give to somebody who's trying to break into the industry as far as to try to stay current with what's happening?
Yeah. As you know, and what we're seeing out there is there are huge changes happening in the industry. Um, Contraction, mergers, between COVID and the strikes. And now, these fires have certainly not helped in the LA market, although none of the fires affected any of the production studios. But it will take its toll as well too, emotionally as well too, for
Right.
actors, not just, and everyone in the business, not just actors, writers, producers, below the line camera operators. Everyone is struggling to figure out their footing as we move forward here. Uh, I I remain positive because we're always going to need content. It just, where is that content going to be produced? And many companies, even though we are in California and LA, the governor is greenlighting a lot of tax credits. There is production that is happening in many other places all over the world, and every business every industry will have its gravy days, its good days, and its tougher days. And this industry is no different. I think we're going through a particularly challenging time right now because it had been so good for so long.
Right.
And right before the pandemic, there were hundreds of projects happening, new pilots, 400 or 500 of them. That was unprecedented before. So, like any stock that's been, or a Bitcoin or anything that just goes straight up after a while, some air has to come out of it. To the actors who are just starting out, they won't really know the difference because they're just starting out.
Right.
And a lot of your actors who are younger actors and are maybe all over the world, they may not feel that. They just see a lot on TV or on film and they want to be part of that. And in a way, that kind of innocence and naivety is exactly where they need to be with this, because they don't have anything to compare it to. The more established actors, the ones who've been in the business 20, 30 years, they've seen the ups and downs. So in many ways, they're potentially used to the slings and arrows of outrageous fortune that they've got to dodge. But it doesn't make it any easier when, they've got kids in college and mortgages to pay, and
Right.
they're not getting as much work as they did before. And they need to find different ways of getting income, or a pivot to different industries for a while, or potentially move into something completely different with the skills that they've learned in the industry. So it is, I know that you folks deal with, emerging talent, newer talent, and in a way, it's important for them to be educated, but not defeated or discouraged by what's going on, because inevitably there will be the next new frontier in the industry that will give them opportunities. And I don't think they should over focus too much on the short term trends, and just look toward training and becoming the best actors they can be, so that they're ready when the eventual next wave comes that they can surf.
Well, that touches here on one of my final questions here for you. I know you have to get going here shortly, but uh, if it's somebody who is brand new, let's say they're watching this right now and they're brand new to the industry, and they really haven't got a foothold yet. They don't have an agent or a manager yet, and they're trying to break in. What would you say? Could you give us like maybe 3 of your most important things that they can do today or this week to start getting ready that would give them, kind of momentum moving forward? What would
Yeah, I mean, there's so much online now on YouTube, and watching actors audition, and the technicals of that. I think it's really important in a way we didn't have before, to educate yourself online. There are always, great books as well too. One of my favorite books is a book called Audition by Michael Shurtleff, Shurtleff. He was one of my first teachers, and was a very famous casting director who became an acting coach and audition teacher. And that was incredibly valuable to me. Even though it was written some years ago, it's still very valuable, the insights. Also, because I know your actors are international, a lot of them are in the US, but a lot of them are everywhere as well too, and you sort of
right,
cover the globe. Um, Really take advantage of what's in your own backyard. Um, in any city, like we mentioned before, there are opportunities for actors to take local classes, improv classes, student films, short films. There's content is being made much easier than it ever used to be. Take advantage of that. Create your own as much. Write as you if you have a story to tell. Put it on the page, and I know every actor and everyone has a dream. I just want actors to be as educated as they can be, and and because so much is online now, even classes are online, as you know.
mhm,
A lot of actors can take online classes, and they can be living in Perth, Australia, but they could be in a workshop or a class, or coaching with a well-respected teacher in Los Angeles or New York or Sydney. So the world is much more available than it used to be. And that's why, even though actors' dreams are to maybe come to LA or come to New York, you don't necessarily have to do that until you're ready, because it's a huge financial, emotional burden to take that leap. And until you're ready, you can build your experience and resume and your foundation wherever you are. So don't be afraid to just look out in what's right in front of you there, and create relationships in your own neighborhoods first, and that will begin to build relationships elsewhere. And the more you do that, because we are looking all over the world now, we'll find you. When we see that creating content and you're becoming one of the better actors in your area, we have a way of finding you, either through the local agents who find you and then present you to us. So don't be in a huge rush. It is a marathon. It's not a sprinty, and it never has been. Even though it feels like some actors have just come out of nowhere, that happens really rarely. They usually come from somewhere and they work really hard at it. It's very rare where an actor just pops and stays on top for their whole careers. There are always going to be hills and valleys. And I think for a lot of actors, it's better to take it one step at a time so that when you do get those breaks, you'll be ready for them instead of having them happen all at once to you.
Well, I have two final questions. One is touching on what you just spoke about, and I know the answer to this, but I just want to hear it from you. At what point should an actor stop training?
Well, you'd probably say an actor should never stop training, and I think in every business, every industry, there are always these opportunities to take to go to seminars and workshops and learn new techniques. I just went to I had a shoulder injury, and I talked to the orthopedic surgeon, who was relatively quite a young guy, and he said, "Oh my gosh, there are so many amazing techniques that I didn't know when I was in med school, and let me show you this. And this is just starting to happen, these kinds of surgeries." And so I just came from this whole weekend where they introduced us to this, and it wasn't radically different from what I did, but it is so much better than what I learned. So to
Right.
see that kind of passion in a doctor or or in real estate or any industry, and we're all changing, whether it's tech, AI, everything is changing pretty quickly. So actors need to do the same thing. They need to stay on top of their craft and not just rest on what they did before. They want to keep creating. Why else do you want to be an actor unless you are going to continue to reinvent yourself and be in a creative world as often as possible? I mean, that's why we're all doing this, is because it is rejuvenating. It does new green shoots grow out. You just can't grow the same crops all the time. You need to be able to pivot to what the industry is changing to. So I think that's really challenging, but it's also really rewarding, and that's what we look for and try to do ourselves.
Always be growing, right? Always be
Yeah.
improving.
Yeah.
Well,
In your
what
personal life too, I think that
right.
that really, especially for actors, that's really useful to keep growing up in your personal life and exploring, and whether that's travel or meeting new people, and that just makes you a more interesting person and ultimately a better actor.
One last question here for you before I let you go. How important is it? I know you touched on this very briefly when we were talking about auditions and self tapes and what you're looking for, but on the headshots you mentioned keeping current with the headshots. Uh, Can you explain that just a little bit more? When you select somebody based on their headshot, but then when they show up or their tape and they don't look like their headshot, has there ever been a moment where you thought, "Oh, I'm watching the wrong person"? Like,
All
"Oh,
the time, all the time. I
I
mean,
didn't ask this person to audition for me."
yeah, and that would happen all the time. I think that's also gotten a bit better as well too. Headshots should everything's digital. You have opportunities to do 4, 5, 6, 7 different looks. They should all be variations of who you are. Again, technically, they should be really well taken. I have certain um, preferences in terms of backgrounds and which. Uh, the bottom line on this is that we really want actors who look like they look like on a good day, or
Right.
even not always on a good day. If it's an actress in her mid 40s, and there is a headshot of that actress as a real estate agent, where she just is more professionally presentable, but looks like who she is, and there's a certain
Mhm.
authority to that headshot. Where we would cast her in these sort of white collar roles. Great, but I also love to see that same actor dressed down, maybe a little more blue collar, a little more rural, a little less put together,
Mhm.
especially if they have that kind of face that supports it. Then we could potentially see them in different kinds of roles. So we want to make sure that whatever image you want to portray, or want us to be able to evaluate, that those are the roles that you actually could also play. And it's just not dress up. These
Right.
are roles that you would like to be considered for. You can play this upscale, Beverly Hills real estate agent, but you can also play maybe a housewife, or a soccer mom in Oklahoma.
Right.
And those are the things we look for. So to be able to have that variation, which helps us think about the possibilities for you as an actor. So work within your range of what you think you can play, and then make sure that you have headshots that yeah, showcase that.
I've never been in your shoes. I've never been a casting director, but I have had interviews, hiring people.
Yeah.
And I, at one point, maybe about a year ago, I was requesting interviews, and I said to each person that was applying for the job, I said, please submit a headshot. I'd love to see what you look like, see if you're going to be like kind of the right fit for what this is customer facing opportunities, right? And I received, several of those submissions, and I chose a few of them to, come on a live Zoom chat. And there was one guy, I will always never forget this because I'm like, this is how casting directors must feel, because his photo was great, but then when he came on Zoom, he was 20 years older. I'm like, this is not the person I chose. Like,
Yes, yeah, it's like a dating website. So,
right.
buyer beware. Um, yeah, and that's it too. Actors need to be aware of what they look like. And again, these days we're looking for real people. We're not looking for overly made up, overly or 20-year-old pictures. And then we think, oh gosh, that actor doesn't really know who they are. And if
Right.
you really don't know how you present and what you look like, we're quite unlikely perhaps to have you audition, because you're living in a different world than we are.
Got it. One last question for you before you leave. I know that you mentioned that you work with actors. Is there any place that somebody can go to? Let's say they're seeing this and they would love to have the opportunity to work with you for some coaching, some training, or whatever. Do you have anything official? Like, what do you recommend they do to be able to
Yeah,
reach?
you can always I do have an actor dedicated email, and it's really
Okay.
simple. It's Paul Weber casting at gmail.com. So you can reach out to me, and if let me know if I can help in any way, or I'm happy to do that. I also have Instagram. It's Paul Weber CD, as in casting director, and that's my IG. So you're more than welcome to DM me there. And for those who are on Facebook, I have Paul Weber Casting. It's not my personal page, it's my actor page. So it's Paul Weber Casting. You're more than welcome to join there. I have an administrator who sort of makes sure that, the actors who join are on the up and up. And on that site, you can look at what other actors are posting, projects they're working on. You can learn a lot from what they're doing as well too. Relationships can be formed there as well too. I monitor it. I'm not always responding to everything, but I do look at those feeds. So there are always ways of staying in touch, either directly through an email for actors who are looking for a little help, or Instagram, which is partially personal, partially work, partially travel, and just where we can engage that way. I don't follow everyone, but I do keep an open mind toward actors, especially the ones who reach out with a question.
Okay, perfect. Well, we appreciate your time. stay safe out there. Obviously, thoughts and prayers to everybody there in LA. And
Yeah.
thank you for taking a moment and kind of enlightening us more about your industry and the way it operates and what we should be working on to better ourselves. We really do appreciate that. And I'll put in the notes as well, your Instagram and everything for people to be able to reach out if they do have a question or want to work with you personally on a project.
Great, and thanks for having me on. And I saw a nice list of guests that you're going to be having in the future, and there's some great people on there, and they'll have their own perspectives as well too. We're all pretty subjective. We all have our own experiences,
Right.
but mine are usually the best ones. No, but again, you'll have some great opportunity to learn from some great industry professionals here. So thanks for making this possible for all of us and all of your listeners and watchers too.
Well, we appreciate it. Have a great rest of your day. Thanks for
Thanks.
joining us. And I hope to see you soon in the near
Great.
future.
Likewise, Jeremy. Stay safe where you are too.
Thanks, Paul.
Okay. Bye-bye.